at any point you feel like anything other than you is controlling the choices and decisions you make, if you feel like your emotions are at the wheel, like the very people who you've always been able to count on are no longer on your side, if the people who love you, people whose love you've never had a reason to doubt, begin to show concerns about how you move, what you say, how you respond, I need you to swear to me that you will come find me. This is Bedtime Stories, Grownup Edition. Short story, Promise Ring, Part 3. When Michael found out that Tamara had been abducted, he was livid, not afraid, pissed. There was no doubt in his mind that the only reason she'd been kidnapped was because of him and his family. His priority was finding her, alive, safe, unharmed, and getting retribution against whoever had the unmitigated gall to enlist DeAndre's help in kidnapping her. He'd heard the version of the story that DeAndre had given the police, and he wasn't buying a word of it. He was hell-bent on finding DeAndre and torturing him until he told him everything he knew. If the story he told the cops and the feds didn't result in finding Tamara before Michael did, it was going to be a whole bunch of slow singing and flower bringing. 15-year-old Michael was ready to put DeAndre on a t-shirt and give his family something to do the following Friday. And he was absolutely confident in his ability to do that. He just needed a little help, because it was going to be virtually impossible for him to navigate and maneuver around all of the soldiers who were always just one step away from him. His parents had been adamant that he let the adults handle it, and he wasn't going. However this situation turned out, he was going to do everything in his power to get his girl back, to return her to the safety of her parents' home. And not even an act of God or Congress was going to stop him from doing that. And when he thought of Congress, he thought of DeAndre's father. That man was going to rue the day that he played in his mother's face and did not prevent his son from continuing to be a thorn in his and Tamara's side. Because as much as he blamed his family's connections in the ongoing war with some international trafficking organization, he absolutely blamed DeAndre for getting Tamara in that situation. He was kicking himself for even listening to his father and going along with the plan that they'd initially concocted together. The one that resulted in DeAndre being embarrassed and was supposed to result in DeAndre leaving Tamara the hell alone. His gut had told him that nothing other than beating the snot out of DeAndre was going to actually be effective. He didn't know everything that his family had done over the years and who all was actively involved in the family's criminal operations. What he knew was that he needed an ally in that world. His father's two closest friends weren't an option. They were more like brothers than friends, and neither of them would go against his father. Even knowing that, Michael wished he could talk to his Uncle Wood. The man was the most dangerous nigga he knew, and he knew a little something about putting in work behind his girl. But Uncle Wood had left Texas, and since he was still pretending to be dead, Michael couldn't just call him up. And all his life, his Uncle LJ had been one way about his mother, so he knew a whole lot of something about protecting and defending women. But his Uncle LJ was recovering from a gunshot wound, so even if he was willing to help, he wouldn't be able to be right by Michael's side while he navigated the situation. There was only one person in the world who Michael knew, who was not only gangster enough to help him get the job done, but crazy enough to give him the green light. He wasn't in the life, but he would do. With Tamara missing and his parents trying desperately to keep him out of the field, he couldn't even move around the family complex freely. His mother had taken his phone, his computer, and all his other technology. So the only way that he was going to have a conversation with the only man who he believed could and would help him was if he got his mother's permission. When he told her that he wanted to go and visit with his Uncle Donovan and have a conversation with him, Angela gave him the 10th, 11th, and 12th degree. In exchange, he summoned up the attitude that he'd given her when they first met. Michael was the product of an ongoing relationship between his father and his mother, Michelle Amora Thomas. His mother had had good reason to be unsure of who his father was. Up until he was about 7 years old, he'd been under the impression that his father was Donovan. And when a DNA test proved that his mother's assumptions were wrong, he was thrust into the St. James world. His expectation was that he'd be going between his mother's household and his father's. But his whole world was turned upside down when his mother was murdered. His whole life, they'd been on the move. At 7 years old, he'd figured out that his mother was hiding from something or someone. But he'd assumed that his mother was simply trying to keep him away from his father. He could have never guessed that the Newport crime family had spent his whole life trying to find her. They had no idea that he even existed, but she'd had information that they needed kept secret. So when his mother had been taken out, he was left with the St. James family and forced to get to know his father's fiancée, Angela. He'd done everything in his power to resist her efforts to love him in an attempt to maintain his loyalty to his mother. It wasn't until he and Melissa had gotten into a little scuffle at school that he realized her love for him was genuine, and that while she could never replace his mother, choosing to love her and to allow her to love him didn't make him disloyal. And the more he got to know Angela, the more he saw his mother's flaws. He realized that had she been a better woman, she would probably have still been alive, and she would have loved Angela too. And he realized that Angela had taken in the daughter of her first husband and her sister, and had managed to love her as her own. He knew that she was a hell of a damn woman. And there hadn't been a year that had passed where Angela hadn't shown that she loved each and every one of her children, as if she had birthed them all. When his brother Quincy V and his sister Isla were born, Angela and his father had both shown that nothing and no one in the world could change or interfere with their love for him, Melissa, or Angel. Angel was Angela's son from her previous marriage, but Q was the only father that he'd ever known, because Angela was pregnant with him when the two met. And even teenage angst and hormones couldn't make him ever disrespect Angela. If it was up to him, she would never ever look at him with disappointment in her eyes. And it didn't take a rocket scientist to know that she was going to be disappointed, because he had to save Tamara. When the attitude that he gave Angela resulted in him walking across the family complex to his Uncle Donovan's house, he concluded that the disrespect was worth it. He didn't know how he would make it right, but he would. But that was going to have to come second to doing what he needed to do to save his girl. He knew his father wouldn't be pleased, but he'd have to make him understand. His father thought he didn't know that they called him Killer Q, because when he was 15 years old, he turned the streets of Brooklyn, New York red behind his sister, Anya. He also thought that he didn't know he'd brought Killer Q back out when Angela had he and his siblings and his cousin Chance in hiding in Puerto Rico. It was his father who'd made it safe for the whole family to come back home. And his father would understand, because if Michael was nothing else, he was his father's son. As he expected, his Uncle Donovan was down for whatever. There was only one problem. Donovan said, "Nephew, do whatever you gotta do to get that girl home safe. But don't be no fool. You gotta live for whatever you do. You gotta answer to God for it too. And it's only gonna be so much that you can hide from your mom. I will help you as much as I possibly can, but I'm in a little situation." Then Donovan told Michael as much as he could about the custody battle that he was facing with baby Bella's grandfather, Clarence. As wild as it sounded, Clarence actually had a good case. While most judges would hesitate to take a child from a biological parent and give custody to a grandparent, Clarence's concerns about baby Bella's safety were not based on mere speculation. They were based on the fact that baby Bella's mother was murdered in the Dominican Republic by gangsters. Donovan himself had been kidnapped in an effort to rescue Veronica, baby Bella, and baby Chance, when she'd whisked them away under the guise of keeping them safe, as a way to stick it to Donovan, because he'd chosen Maribel. After years of Veronica basically torturing him, she'd been butthurt, rightfully so, that he'd not only gotten baby Chance's mother Destiny pregnant, but she'd walked in on him taking Destiny down, while both women were pregnant with his child. And on the day that baby Chance was born, Destiny hadn't survived childbirth. leaving Donovan as a single father. Baby Bella was also born, and while he'd co-parented with Veronica over the next few years, she'd made it clear that baby Chance was not her responsibility. And her willingness to use Donovan for his resources and to string him along resulted in her losing him forever. When her attempts to seduce him failed miserably, she took the money that Emmanuel Lopez had paid her to test Donovan's devotion to his daughter and blew town, resulting in all 5 of the Notorious Five Families committing themselves to the effort to locate her and Donovan's children. And for Donovan's part, he went off the deep end. Donovan was mentally ill. He was living with bipolar disorder, and he was also a savant. While he wasn't in the life, he'd proven that he was more than capable of getting in the field. And he took his talents on the road when he left town, heading directly for the DR. Thankfully, Q and LJ found his children, and with them safe at home, he turned the Dominican Republic upside down because he'd summarily destroyed the Ramirez family, the very organization that had gone after Veronica and his children in the first place, in an effort to get retribution for decisions that his mother, the Queen Mother, Bella Baptiste St. James, had made decades earlier. Clarence didn't know all of the ins and outs, but he absolutely knew that his daughter had been found shot dead in the DR in the territory of drug lords. And he knew that Donovan had gone to the DR to find his children. They'd been returned home safely, but Donovan had been MIA for over a month. Clarence also knew that his sister Bernadette, affectionately called Bernie, had been entangled in Donovan's family by way of her relationship with Angela. And she'd been murdered on the streets of Dallas. 60-plus-year-old women don't get gunned down every day. So it was clear to Clarence that despite what the police had said, her death was directly connected to whatever Donovan's family was into. Hell, at one point his sister, his daughter, and his granddaughter had hid out in his family home in Moline because of some other dangerous situation that Donovan's family had been involved in, the war with the Newport organization. And according to his sister, Angela and her sister, Stephanie, were both in hiding in separate locations. Stephanie was in witness protection provided by the FBI. So by his estimation, and the file that he and his lawyers had assembled and presented to a judge, Donovan and his family were the common denominator, and his granddaughter was in danger. Donovan told Michael, "I gotta be on my P's and Q's, dot all my I's and cross all my T's while I fight this case. I cannot be caught up in any kind of violent situations, have any unnecessary contact with law enforcement. While I fight this case, I got to be the owner of an architecture firm and a minister of the gospel. But behind the scenes, I got you." When Michael told Donovan that he was his only hope, Donovan said, "Nah, nephew. You got a whole family that'll move heaven and earth for you. And I get why you want to do this yourself. As a matter of fact, I agree that you have a unique skill set and access to information that your pops just doesn't. So I'm going to do you one better. I'm going to connect you with your Uncle Sam. You do realize that he is the only man to ever retire from being the kingpin of a Notorious Five family. That's an extraordinary feat all of itself. And if anybody knows what it's like to want to and not be able to keep your woman safe and bring her home safely, he is absolutely that man." Samuel had been married to Selena, the short-lived head of the Lopez organization, the older sister of Emmanuel Lopez. And shortly after giving birth to their daughter Selena, she'd chosen to go right back into the lion's den, resulting in her untimely demise and Samuel having to raise Selena without a mother. His daughter Selena was now in the running to become the head of the Baptiste family. When Samuel retired, his sister came back out of retirement, assumed his position as head of the Baptiste family, and agreed to train and prepare his daughter Selena to one day be queenpin. Her efforts had been sidelined by the fact that she'd gotten pregnant, and Samuel was helping her husband Wise keep her from going down the very same path that her mother had. She delivered their baby Alana prematurely, almost directly as a result of her efforts to save her own husband from an attack made by hired guns on behalf of the same international trafficking organization. They had literally hit the family with everything they had. And what they couldn't do themselves, they paid someone else to do. Selima had saved her husband and gone into preterm labor. And when her baby was born, wise Samuel, the queen mother, and Mom Brenda had to stop her from going and putting in work. Work that could be easily and simply handled by someone else. She'd finally agreed to sit her narrow behind tail down. And while Samuel was keeping an eye on her, supporting her, and enjoying visiting with his new grandbaby, he had time to burn. His wife was in Denver, Colorado, with her son, his stepson, Big Wood, the man who'd faked his own death and was expecting a baby of his own in a matter of weeks. There had been a whole lot of baby making going on. That's a long story. You're going to have to go back to Resurrection. Oh, actually, Genesis, to get that backstory. But something was obviously in the water in Denton, Texas, because everybody had got knocked up. Well, everybody but Rennie, LJ's baby sister. There was also a lot of mental illness in the family. But anybody who knows, knows. Where you have criminal enterprises, you have two other things: violence and mental illness. And where you have mental illness, you often have superior intelligence. You almost got to be crazy to be as smart as some of the criminals in the world are. We've all seen our share of stupid criminals. But at the level that the Notorious Five Families was operating at, and with the decades for which they'd been successful, violence, mental illness, and superior intelligence were clearly all a part of the recipe. So before Donovan made that phone call to Samuel on Michael's behalf, he said, "I was about your age. The first time my thoughts and my behaviors started dropping clues that my mind didn't quite work like everybody else's. I started being suspicious of the motives of others and seeing enemies where they really didn't exist. Your pops being the main one. I was the only one who didn't see, nephew, that I wasn't quite playing with a full deck, if you know what I mean. I've made a lot of mistakes as a result of not getting the help that I needed. Not being honest with myself that I needed help. Combination of brilliance and mental illness made me a dangerous man. Unfortunately, I wasn't just dangerous when it was necessary. I was dangerous to myself, the people I loved. I made mistakes that cost me money, friends, good women. It almost cost me my business, and it absolutely played a part in Clarence's daughter losing her life. I'm telling you this because I can tell from the look in your eyes. There's a war going on inside you, nephew. And it's more than just concern for this girl. The type of things you have survived can easily be classified as the kinds of trauma that set the stage for mental illness. And like any other disease, genetics, trauma, participating in extreme, emotionally charged activities, like the level of violence that this situation requires, can absolutely be the catalyst to mental illness rearing its ugly head. If at any point you feel like anything other than you is controlling the choices and decisions you make, if you feel like your emotions are at the wheel, like the very people who you've always been able to count on are no longer on your side, if the people who love you, people whose love you've never had a reason to doubt, begin to show concerns about how you move, what you say, how you respond, I need you to swear to me that you will come find me." Well, Michael said that he felt perfectly fine, and he'd actually had a similar conversation with his mother when he was younger, when his Uncle Donovan had flipped on everybody and was accusing them all of conspiring with Veronica against him. And she had explained his uncle's mental illness, the signs that it was out of control, and the signs that he should look for, just in case there were concerns that he'd inherited the same diagnosis. And Donovan was relieved that this wasn't the first time someone had broached the subject with Michael, because no one had ever broached it with him. The fact that his Uncle Nigel also had bipolar disorder had been kept a secret from him. It had actually been kept a secret from everyone until after his Uncle Nigel's untimely demise, when it was discovered that the man who killed him, Jeff, who everyone had thought was his father, Pop's Andy's son, turned out to be his father and uncle's youngest brother. It was then that everyone learned that not only was Nigel mentally ill, so was Jeff, and so was their father, Quincy Anders St. James II. Donovan said, by now, your parents should know what it looks like. The only issue is that they don't know what it feels like. The same way you didn't hesitate to come to me about Tamara's disappearance, don't hesitate to come to me about anything else, especially this. I've had my share of inpatient treatment, and I've sat in therapy with other people just like me. When treatment was over, I was being released to continue my life. But many of those people, like my son Justice's mother, Portia, would never be released back into society again, either because they'd done things that, despite their mental illness, had earned them a lifetime stay in a long-term treatment facility, or they'd be beginning a lengthy prison sentence as soon as a doctor said that they were competent enough to be kept in a prison. Before I make this phone call, I need your word, your solemn oath, that no matter what you do, no matter what happens, no matter what battle you fight, you will not underestimate the blood running through your veins. I do not want to have to visit my oldest brother's oldest son in a maximum security prison. You are entirely too intelligent and too gifted to devolve into madness. All because you have too much pride, too much cocky in you, and too much me in you to trust someone else to recognize the signs that you need help. I've been there, done that, got a t-shirt, a shot glass, and 3 illegitimate children to prove that I know what that's like. And with Michael's solemn vow to notify his uncle and ask for help if anything didn't seem right in his mind, Donovan called Uncle Samuel. And Michael was surprised to learn that his uncle had left Texas. He'd gone back to Puerto Rico. He was providing his counsel for a situation that involved the abduction of one of his closest friends, the Lopez general, Nathaniel Big Nate Jimenez. But hearing what his nephew needed, he'd said he'd be there within a matter of hours. He just needed to have a conversation with Michael's father first.
Anybody could be a daddy, just bust a nut and leave, but I'm a father, and I'ma be everything he need and more.
I'm glad you grew up to become that everything you could be. That's all I wanted for you, youngin', like father, like son.